So welcome again to the Benefits of Upskilling to Adapt to the Modern Workplace. If you're just joining us, I'm Dr. Yogini Joglekar, and I'm the Head of Operations at Edstudia. Edstudia is an online learning platform at the intersection of business and technology, and we are making learning exciting by integrating virtual reality and augmented reality into learning. And what we find, one of the amazing things with using VR and AR in learning is the ability to develop hands-on skills and experiences that are going beyond theoretical knowledge that education seems to primarily focus on. And so what we consider ourselves synonymous with, Edstudia is synonymous with smart and relevant skilling. That's the reason we are hosting this webinar today. Just some findings to throw out at you. More than 1/4 of adults report a mismatch between their education and the skills they require to do their jobs. So what we're going to do today is have a really open and honest discussion about what is the skills gap, why does it exist, and what we're going to do about it. And in the spirit of true collaboration, we're going to invite you to participate, chime in, send in your questions, and really become part of the solution. We're so lucky today to have a host of expert panelists who are bringing us diverse perspectives on the topic. And I'm starting in alphabetical order with the last name. We have Olivier Courtois, who has worked in various aspects of leadership development, and he's currently with Mercury Uvar. Dr. Julie Goldman is the Shark Tank winning founder of the Original Runner Company. And Dr. Chris Jansen is the founder and CEO of Edstudia. Finally, we have Beth Yoder, who is the founder and CEO of P3 Hires. Some very qualified panelists today. Panelists, let me invite you to introduce yourself, starting with Olivier. Who are you and why are you here today?
All right. Well, I have a passion for people and business development, so I guess this is the right place to be. I got more than 35 years of experience in many different aspects of people and business development. I've been a leader myself. I've been on the HR side, on the training side, I've traveled around the planet, worked on the 5 continents, so and still learning. So really looking forward to share my views and hear yours.
Thank you, Julie.
I'm Julie. Nice to see all of you. My business of 18 years really saw a change in the skills that we needed to run the company from the day I started it until the end. The same positions that people had, which were non-technology positions, became technology positions eventually because of the continual change and innovation that we're seeing. So there is a skills gap, and I'm highly passionate about it. My doctorate degree was on how we can take the welfare to work transition and add education and skills training to break that cycle. So I think that the skills gap has always been an issue, but now because of technology and because of automation, we are seeing a significant decrease in the ability of skilled workers to find jobs.
True. And Chris?
Hi, everybody. So I have been a business professor for the last 12 years and taught prior to that as well. But I've recently resigned from higher ed altogether to focus on Edstudia because I have experienced this and seen kids come through college and then not having the right skills for all the jobs that are in demand, or the skills that are available with all these jobs. I've been doing all this research on the skills gap, and there are 7 million jobs that are unfilled. And this is like the can kicked down the road month after month, year after year. Yet, ironically, there are about 7 million unemployed people who are actively seeking work. That's a lot of people in a lot of positions. So one of the reasons I started Edstudia is to address that skills gap head on by providing a learning platform that actually is listening to what industry is asking for, what's in demand, and making sure that we're educating people on those skills. And these could be soft skills and hard skills, but my passion around this too is there's got to be a better alternative. And it's critical that whether you're starting your career or you're already a professional, that we've got to keep our skills updated constantly. So I would like, my goal here is to inspire everybody to embrace lifelong learning and constantly, it's demanded in the world that we live in. So that's a little bit about my background. background, but I actually launched this business to address the skills gap head on.
Thank you. And finally, we have Beth.
Hi, everyone. I'm so excited to be here today. I am the founder of P3 Hired, which is an executive search firm. So we provide recruiting services. And so on a daily basis, I am talking to hiring managers, companies, organizations, as well as job seekers. So my experience with the skills gap is real, and it's every day. I hear about the delta between what a hiring company needs and what they can find, and talking with them about the pain points every single day. And I talk to job seekers who are frustrated or maybe not getting the roles that they're looking for because they don't have, significant skill areas. So I think this is a very important conversation. I'm very invested in identifying new and creative ways to bridge the gap. So pleased to be here today.
Super. Thank you so much, all of you. And I see a new attendee as well. Bridget, welcome. If you don't mind, there should be a poll on your screen saying which perspective are you coming in from? Are you somebody who's looking to upskill? Are you an employer? Are you from human resources? Are you an educator? So if you could do that, or if you don't see the poll, I'd request you to just put your response in the chat. Which perspective are you coming from, and what questions do you have about upskilling and the workplace as we dive into the discussion? So, before we start off, we'll just do a quick definition, because we hear these terms bandied around so much, upskilling and reskilling. Let's have a quick definition. Reskilling, according to SHRM, the Society for Human Resource Management, is focusing on creating new skill sets so individuals, employees can qualify for new positions, right? So that is reskilling. And upskilling is staying in the same job, but adapting and getting new skills. So with reskilling, for example, you can think about, let's say, a truck driver who wants to completely retrain as a computer programmer. And with upskilling, you might want to think about a bank teller who's acquiring new skills and trying to stay current with how consumer banking has evolved rapidly, right? So those are the two main differences. But the really basic question, which I wanted to start with, is this really anything new? Hasn't this been something that we've seen over and over again with the nature of work changing and new technologies emerging that have always required upskilling? So let me throw that at you, Olivier. Why is there such a discussion around the so-called skilling emergency today?
Well, interestingly enough, and to your point, I think Deloitte said that the average lifespan of a skill is between 2.5 years and 5 years. So it means that if you have a job and you don't plan to change jobs, that you're fine where you are, well, what you're doing may be completely outdated in 5 years maximum. So upskilling and reskilling really makes sense. If you look at the Davos Forum, I think the last one was in January 2020, the shortage of talent and the impact it had on growth, potentially, globally, is a key issue. I think PwC, in its global CEO survey, the 23rd edition, said that upskilling is probably, surely a key lever to overcome that shortage of talent. And what you see today is organizations that are basically strategically thinking of going outside of their home market, not for cost reason, but just because they can't find the talent anymore and they could be stalled in their growth. So upskilling is on organizations and people's minds. It's on organizational minds. I mean, more than 50% of CEOs and decision makers are saying that they might lose competitiveness because of a lack of skills and competencies. And more than 50% of individuals are saying that they see their job dramatically changing in the next 10 years. So there's a need on both sides. And an interesting fact as well is that more and more, and maybe top the list today, behavioral skills are key and are being searched by recruiters. And I'm sure, Beth, you could confirm that. Behavioral skills, like, for example, the capacity to learn fast, to collaborate with others, to communicate effectively, to to have a growth mindset, to take initiative, all these kinds of behaviors. And finally, I would say that the COVID crisis has not changed a lot to the landscape, or maybe it has, meaning I think what the COVID crisis has done is that it has accelerated the transformations that we were going through. New ways of working. I mean, the divide between home and office, between work time and leisure time is completely blurred now, and more than ever. New technologies have come into place. I mean, look at Teams, look at Zoom, how it has, the technologies have evolved in just a year. So it has accelerated the situation. And then the second thing is that COVID has served as a revealer. Today you hear about the great resignation. I don't know if it's a long-term trend or just a peak, but people are certainly thinking twice about, why am I having this job? What kind of job do I want? And upskilling them can be a great way to retain them and create some loyalty.
Yeah, absolutely. And thank you for that. And I see Bridget's comment as well, where you're trying to figure out where do you fit in. You say you have plenty of soft skills that Olivier just mentioned. I'll throw this out at our recruiter, Beth, and say, what are really the skills that you're seeing the gap being in? Is there a difference between hard skills, soft skills? So which skills? And then the second part of the question would be, are there industries and sectors where this upskilling is more of a dire need compared to others?
Absolutely. And I'm glad Bridget's on, because I think she's going to be a great example of exactly someone who's upskilling as we speak. So just to start up, and I'll answer all of those questions. I come from the recruiting perspective. So again, going back to, I listen to both sides every day as part of my job is really being a great listener. And what is evident is the pandemic, and I'll, based upon what Olivier said, the pandemic has really highlighted how we live and work. And so it's created this sense of urgency around upskilling and to do it quicker and faster and better. And also coupled with this, the job landscape right now is highly competitive. So in the recruiting world, it's become harder to find the right people. But if you find the right people, watch out, because they've got multiple opportunities. Everyone else has a hard time differentiating themselves. So there are certain industries, absolutely, that you find this more pronounced, which I will cover in just a second. Before I go there, because of the competitive landscape of the job market as it stands today, and we saw this many years ago as well, so it's very cyclical, but it's very pronounced right now. It's requiring and forcing organizations to be more nimble and to think differently. So it is an opportunity for reskilling and upskilling conversations to take place, because not only do they need to fill their internal pipeline, because they are having a hard time competing externally. So you're finding a lot more people, how do I teach internally? How do I teach these skills to people that I already know and I trust? And if we give them one more skill, they're then going to be a retained and happy employee. So it's this life cycle of opportunity with upskilling. Job seekers, and maybe Bridget can, talk about this too, and in our Q&A, differentiating yourself and identifying skills that will make you an ideal candidate for a job. People are out there, whether you're a return to work parent, whether you're a high school student that is looking for an alternative to the college experience, or a recent college grad, or someone who's looking to get promoted. You constantly have to find ways to differentiate. So to get to the question of which industries, which functional areas I see this in, it's pretty simplistic, actually. It's those roles where the demand for that profession is greater than the supply, which creates the slippery slope and the domino effect of increased time and money being spent to find these individuals. So the industries that I would quickly highlight as highly competitive are technology and anything IT related. The health and medical field, office and administrative roles, and architecture and construction. And within those professions, I could boil it down further. There's certain roles or certain jobs themselves that are very difficult for hiring teams to find. I want to highlight sales, and that is an entry-level sales individual, whether that's, they call them BDRs or SDRs, business development representatives or sales development representatives, which require skill sets in terms of this, and again, piggybacking on soft skills, this is excellent communication skills, verbal and written, and the ability to build rapport by voice. So how do you teach that? You know, so it's very difficult to put someone on a phone and a cold call without having those specific skills. Programmers, coders, developers, from a technical computer science or IT perspective, very difficult to find. In the marketing world, oftentimes you're hearing, we need creative platform experience. That's Adobe Suite. Those are other creative and graphic design skills. Whether it's administrative, the Microsoft Office Suite, the ability to calendar, the calendaring skill is something that you'd be amazed at how people who are in the administrative field feel like they still need to keep up with the recent technologies and everything that has to offer. So I hope that helps.
Yeah, absolutely. And the question also arises, why do we have to keep revisiting this, right? Why can't education be sort of the one-stop solution that's already providing us the skills? I know that's why you started at Studia, Chris.
Oh boy, open up the can of worms here. Actually, it's both Olivia and Beth have already addressed this, that when we talk about upskilling, it's not just hard skills. Like there's absolutely the tech, and we all have to stay on top of that. But I did my own research as well last summer with hiring managers and asked them, it's like, what exactly are you looking for? What's important to you when you consider a candidate? And so many of the things they're looking for really are the soft skills. And a lot of these things aren't taught in a traditional college program. The things like, they're like, I want people who work well in teams and collaborate. I want somebody who's got some hustle. I want somebody who's assertive and doesn't sit around waiting for somebody to tell them what to do. I want somebody who can dive in and deal with ambiguity and uncertainty. Like think about last year with the pandemic, there was no handbook that's like, okay, this is how we deal with this. So we're going to have to deal with this more and more. And the collective, all of us, anybody who's, has a career, that we're constantly going to have to deal with, these what if scenarios. And there aren't any, hard and fast rules to how to deal with this. So the more we can teach people to be able to problem solve and decision making and think on their feet, which is easier said than done, by the way. That's what employers want. People can think for themselves. Too much of what college stands for these days, it's the right and wrong, and it's black and white, and there's one way to do something, and we need people who, again, who can think. And so a lot of these soft skills. So actually, a lot of things we're doing at that studio too, there's a lot around mindset. How do you approach opportunities? How do you approach problems? And that's a tough thing to teach people that, again, it's just not found in traditional curriculum. But I want to build off of what Beth was saying too, about like some of the roles and where the change is and also where the opportunity is. And so I read this was from a SHRM article. The OECD, so the Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development, they did a study and found that 50% of jobs that exist today run the risk of becoming changing drastically or becoming obsolete. And I always love the This is from my higher ed perspective. I love the statistic that you've got incoming freshmen, say they're coming in right now. There's a really strong likelihood that by the time they graduate in 4 years, they're going to work for a company that doesn't exist today. It could be even full industries that don't exist today. You know, think about how social media happened. They weren't learning how to do social media in college. This is like an organic thing. So I find that fascinating. It freaks a lot of people out, but I think it's fascinating. And as far as like these jobs becoming obsolete, I'm not of the camp that says, like, oh no, the jobs are going away. I see opportunity all over the place. So the people who are maybe losing their jobs due to automation, there's an opportunity for them to learn more about technology, because we need people to drive and develop and build and manage all this technology. Right. So you can even think about autonomous devices and vehicles. Okay, gone are the bus drivers or the cab drivers or whatever, but somebody's got to build this on the other side. Somebody's got to manage the technology and still operate that. So I just see a ton of opportunity, but that's my perspective. But we can see, you know, things that are already happening in the disruption in certain industries and jobs, like travel agents. Like, actually, do any of those still exist? I'm like floored when I hear
bank tellers, right? As I was saying that, I was like, are there still bank tellers?
Yeah, there are, I think, but it's a little bizarre. So you take a job like that, or even bank tellers, even like cashiers, like, and these are a little more, you know, entry level types of positions, but that's all being automated. So instead of going, oh, my job's gone, what's the next step up? How can I add more value? How can I do something that's actually that much more interesting than trying to hold on to that type of position? So the ones that are being automated, of course, are the ones that tend to be more menial. Okay. So amen. Good. Let's create some better, more challenging, interesting opportunities. And so when I look at industries that are vulnerable today, I'd look at transportation, even as we're talking about public transportation, because of autonomous vehicles and devices. I was recently at Intel in Silicon Valley, and in their visitor center, they have this whole wall of like the community or the city of the future, and it's all autonomous, how people are getting around. It's amazing, and it's pretty cool. Again, some people freak out at that, but I find it pretty interesting. You can even take like a solid position like a financial advisor. Okay, or bankers and analysts. There are so many cool tools out there. And I'll speak to one it's actually a tool in virtual reality called D6, that it's multi-dimensional analysis. And you are like actually in the bar charts and graphs and stuff, and you got screens all around you to help you make decisions. The access to information is like, holy cow. So imagine now you got people with 2 Bloomberg screens on their desk. I mean, this sort of thing blows that away. You know, we all know this, like having access to information, being able to consume it, digest it, and make decisions on that is where the power and the opportunity is. So, wow, you still have things like that. So of course, like manufacturing, okay, how things are going to be automated. I would even, of course, they're going to look at education. You know, things are changing all around us, and everything you could ever want to know and learn is already available for free online. So how is higher ed going to adapt? So we have to pay attention to not just, you know, the business side, but also the learner side, the individual. And it's like, that's why we're, you know, trying to connect this, both sides of the equation through Ed Studio by offering opportunities for students to learn. Learners. I mean, students can be in all different shapes and sizes and levels, but learning things that are in demand. And unfortunately, I feel like a lot of education providers, there's a lag, and they're not staying in step with what industry is looking for, what businesses are looking for.
And I see Julie's nodding furiously throughout all this, right? And it brings to mind, you were talking about transportation. I just read this morning that there's a severe shortage of bus drivers, school bus drivers in Minnesota, right? And that's a tempting question, because do we now go and get more bus drivers and, you know, stay with that skill, or are we looking at automated buses right down the road? And from a strategic perspective, I know, Julie, you've taken businesses from start to finish, right, and really grown them. Do you even see this in entrepreneurship, or is this more of a sort of big business kind of a thing that you need to upskill and change and develop? And that's a broader question too. How are you going to be smart about upskilling from the organizational and the employee perspective? Like, where do you invest that hard-earned money, and how do you get the biggest bang for the buck when it comes to upskilling? Big question. So throwing out at all of you, but starting with Julie.
Well, first I want to say about the buses. Today was the first day of school and the bus didn't come. So I had a driver, and I would say, yay, if there's anything that makes buses better, I'm in. From an organizational perspective, I find upskilling and reskilling to be a really imperative piece. My business for 18 years was an arts-based business. I hired mostly very young 20-somethings out of college who were either artists, graphic designers, sales, logistics. Okay. So originally I'd have logistics people, and what that actually meant were people who packaged my product by hand, got the labels ready and shipped it. What that turned into was a role that they needed to understand logistics automation, logistics automation. They needed to understand barcoding systems. They needed to understand integrating that into FedEx and into our CRM. So you took someone who used to just package product, and by the end, I couldn't fill that role because I couldn't find enough people who could do the actual outside skills of that and still want to be in an entry-level role in logistics in a small company. So it's a real dichotomy trying for smaller businesses to find people they can afford who have the skills. I would venture to say that hiring and retaining not as much, but hiring was one of the biggest headaches of owning my own business. Trying to find people who were skilled. We get hundreds of resumes, and I'd say 4 had even adaptable skills to what we were looking for. And, even our artists who hand painted everything eventually had to start videotaping. We actually videotaped everything we hand painted in QuickTime, and those videos were wildly popular on social media. But a lot of artists would come in and be like, I'm intimidated by that. I don't want to have to worry about the camera and setting up and loading. But that was part of the job, and it became an integral part of the job. So even jobs that you wouldn't consider necessarily being jobs that require even tech skills for that piece have become tech jobs, number one. Number two, I really believe in the soft skills. I think what's keeping us from filling that skills gap is partly a very soft skill known as adaptability. If you cannot adapt to how things are changing and where the world is going, then you will be left behind. And those who do, I don't hear you when it comes to tech or where your business is going, I think you're going to be wildly surprised when you're, let go of your company because you aren't no longer filling that gap. So how do we, address that? How do we take someone who's come out of a 4-year degree that might have been a very liberal arts degree with biology and a language and whatever, and suddenly expect them to do, like you said, even a sales job that requires them to be on a CRM? And it seems, obvious, and it seems like some of it should be really simple to learn. But I think the two things that hold back the skills gap are fear and adaptation. And if you're afraid to learn a new skill, if you're unwilling or unable to adapt to the environment and where your company may be going or where the world is going, I think that's where you get left behind. What I think is important about where we're going with education and truly what you're doing, Chris, with EdStudia is you are incorporating those tech skills into the education. I feel that anyone who goes through an online education at this point that is multi-tiered, whether it is VR, AR, Zoom-based, any other type of presentation, deck building, those types of things are going to prepare them for their job. If you're not requiring that in the learning, it's almost impossible to expect it in the actual role. So that's the upskilling piece. The reskilling piece, when you're an employer, is expensive. You have to bring in trainers. You may have to send them for reskilling. So for me, I found that when I brought new people in, I was kind of amazed of how afraid they were of tech, how afraid they were of even the basic technology of a computer. If you bring someone in there used to being on a Mac, I had people freak out because we were not on Mac. And they were like, I don't know where anything is. It's exactly the same, but the fear was so substantial of that difference. And it isn't that different. So we need to be more open. I think those soft skills of also communication and in saying when you don't understand and asking for a reskilling is a big part of it for employers. You need to open that door and let your employees know that there is an opportunity to upskill at your company or reskill, that you want them to remain with you, but I'm going to teach you this and that. And I've had people who've gone from interns to senior roles at my company because they continually came back with initiative and said, I want to do more. I don't want to like leave the company. And I think that's where employers are missing the boat. They're looking for new people outside without looking inside first and saying and giving the opportunity, because I believe if you present that opportunity for reskilling and you say it's available, those with initiative and adaptability will reach for it. And those are your key employees. Those that are afraid are going to fall to the side. So I think it's going to be a really interesting period. This year has forced us all to move forward, right? It's forced everyone to be on Zoom, and it's forced everyone to be able to reach, remotely. And this group of people, Chris is the only person I've ever met in person. And I think we're all going to find that. And that's what, for me, being able to adapt has been really hard for me as well. And I'm working on it. We all are.
Are you seeing that, Olivia? I see you just unmuted yourself. Are you seeing that with the leaders that you're working with as well? This kind of soul searching and really thinking about what upskilling means for their businesses.
Yeah, no, but I think, I believe that the role of fear, as you say, Julie, is very key in stalling people. But sometimes it's also a question of just mindset and belief system. You talk about agility. I would even use the word growth mindset. I think that there's several people that very soon in their professional lives start to identify with their job and their role. And then they believe, I'm not that new role, I'm not that role, I am. And they identify themselves with what they're doing today. And that gets in the way of being able to imagine themselves, reinventing themselves after a certain age, and sometimes very early in their career. So I think finding models maybe, or talking to people that very late in their lives have changed their lives. You see people at the age of 60 who suddenly decide to launch a business. The more you see those examples, the more you start to think, oh, maybe I could reinvent myself. So I think that's a very, very important point to bring forward. And yes, organizations have a key role to play, but I think individuals also have to play their role. I like to call them the 3 A's, the ask for development, act on your own development, and anticipate what you might need. And of course, Zoom, every platform is absolutely key to learn. Online learning, it's very key to reinvent yourself. But I think it's also very much coming from practicing. So I would also encourage people to go out and find, leisure time where they can do something different, where new skills are required and where they learn, some of the soft skills or the hard skills outside of their job, and not necessarily on a training or on a course online. So I think a mix of all these things is key if you want to grow.
Yeah, and that let's not forget what Bridget is also asking, right, in terms of where to practice, because she's saying she's upskilling, but she's still looking for a place to actually put this in practice, right? And the two questions might be, and maybe at you, Beth, and at Chris, the two questions might be, what could employees or people who are looking for jobs, looking to transition, do in terms of smart upskilling? And in what ways are they going to reap benefits out of it? And what are the pathways and what are the potential benefits that they should maybe focus on?
Yeah, I could say, just in terms of a job seeker who is looking for a way to find that next amazing career, there's a lot of ways you can tackle it, but sometimes those differentiators, and nowadays it is platforms, it's experience in certain technologies and ways that you can kind of get to dip your toe in a company, maybe not be your end all be all position, right? But it's a way in. It is a way to start the conversation, and it's a very quantifiable, actual hard skill that you bring to the table. And then on top of that, if you layer in amazing soft skills, they can see potential and they'll want to give you the opportunity. So it is sometimes having some level of openness to a role that, sure, it might not be 100% of what you envision for your career move, but if it has 70%, and you can see the potential of it growing, but if you can gain one skill or two hard skills, I do think it gives the permission to talk or ask for more as well. So it's just, opens the door initially. So in the case of, marketing experience, for example, if you do have the Adobe Suite and the design experience, there are roles that is, a big requirement. But I do have to say the conversations as a recruiting firm, we have oftentimes is, okay, Mr. Hiring or Miss Hiring Manager, how open are you to looking at someone who might have 70% of what you're looking for? And how are you going to fill that other 30%? And so it becomes a two-way conversation often, especially in the competitive nature of the job market we're in. So I find my advocating for these job seekers, like this is everything they bring to the table, and I can give voice to that. Now, not everyone has that opportunity. So how does that become more of a real conversation and just a regular conversation when it comes to talent development or identification of talent? So I think it's it's going to be an evolution for sure.
Yeah, and are you finding companies are receptive to that? Are they seeing the benefits of doing that?
Some more than others. I think that sometimes it becomes an urgency. There, people are in, the pain points for smaller or medium-sized organizations is there's not a lot of bandwidth. And so if you're down a position, it's critical and there's no one to fill it. So sometimes having that conversation is great in theory, but I know at the end of the day, if you have an open seat, it's tough. You're not getting the job done.
I think it's also the cost of reskilling, if I'm correct.
Right.
I mean,
right.
The Economic Forum said it costs like $25,000 per person to reskill somebody that's a displaced worker. So, we have all these people that are out of work. And if we really think about what companies are taking on in the financial to retrain people and to reskill them, it could be obviously a bank breaker for smaller businesses that don't have those in-house training, facilities. So I think that, part of reskilling and upskilling even isn't just the actual technical skills or even the soft skills. It's also the coaching, in-person workshops, I don't think that there's enough career coaching for people that are already employed and where they could go. Often people land in a role and they think that's where they stay. They don't even understand that they could add skills to their toolkit and move up where they are. And I think that the problem kind of falls back slightly on employers of giving opportunity, but also in the way we are educating and training our younger people to understand that a career is a building process. It doesn't just go here and then you stay there for life. Otherwise, we're not leaving room for others to join the party, right? Yeah. So, that's really where it comes in. For me, it was very expensive. I used to send people for CRM training and other logistical training and things, and it gets very expensive. They're not useful to me for like 3 months, by the time I get their skills up. So I think that is from a perspective of an employer, it's quite expensive to, get everyone where they need to be. And so I think it has to be an education thing from the beginning, but also a community thing.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And Olivia, I think you had a perspective on that. I remember us chatting about this, and you said, it doesn't always have to be this expensive. There's several different pathways to upskilling, right? So could you maybe speak to that and talk about what are the different ways of upskilling that employers could be looking at?
Right. Well, first of all, from the employee perspectives, I would say that sometimes, and I've done that once or twice in my life, where I wanted a job and I was stalled because there were a few things I needed to learn or know or be certified in, and didn't get a job. So what I did is I went on my own and paid from my own pocket to be certified on those tools, so that 1 year later I'd come back and say, knock, 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 I really want that job, and now I'm certified, But so that's one aspect. You're saying, Judy, yes, I can understand. I've also created my own businesses at some point in my life. I know what it is when you have cash and you have to decide where you put your cash, and betting on someone that is not productive now is a real tough issue. But at the same time, study shows that when you have to hire someone new and train a person, it can cost up to twice the annual cost of that person versus upskilling or reskilling someone you have in place. So sometimes it's choosing between two evils, but one evil is more expensive than the other. From an organizational perspective, you can do lots of different things. I mean, you can be, what I see now is some of my clients being extremely creative in creating platforms, where in the past you would have days of training, now you have 1 hour or 2 online, but it's combined with group coaching sessions in small groups. So it's sequential. So, it's a journey, and it brings very good results for a lower cost. You've got these big coaching platforms. You were talking about coaching, Judy. In the US, you've got BetterUp. They have this new business model where they don't charge per hour for their coaches anymore, but they charge, per subscription, a yearly subscription per employee. And then you have access 24/7 to any coach you want in the world. And you've got similar platforms now in other parts of the world. So there's lots of different ways, putting people on projects, encouraging people to do some volunteer work can also develop a lot of the soft skills that you're looking for. If you want to speak in public, go to Toastmasters. It costs a few dollars, and you learn fast. So, I think there's lots of different ways, and the employee has got 50% of control on this. I think more and more they have to take their own development in their own hands. If their organization can help them, fantastic. If not, they have to be faster and more creative than their neighbors if they want to have the better jobs.
Yeah, and not just, go ahead, Chris. Yeah, I was just going to think of
add to this, because so I'm thinking about Bridget too. I think that learning these days has to be much more deliberate and purposeful from both the employer side as well as the employee. So, for example, there's a whole bunch of software programs out there. There's one called Phenom and one that's AG5. There's a whole bunch out there, and I'm not necessarily plugging for them, just giving some examples, but they do an assessment at an organizational level and say, where are you now? And what are the skills that you're lacking, and where do you need to go? And then put a strategic plan together to help them actually fill the gap within their own organization. Now, on an individual side, you could do that as well. Do inventory of your skills and start paying attention to what are the skills that are in demand, and making sure that you are learning those specific skills. Like if you need to reinvent yourself or just piggyback on some tech skills you already have, be laser focused, because that's what employers are looking for. Hone in on that. And I have to tell you, that's one of the things that we did at Studia, is finding out how do we close this gap. So listening to what those demands in the workplace are. What are the skills, hard and soft, they're looking for? And that's precisely what we're offering at Studia. There's no fluff. This is not the ivory tower saying, oh, we should learn X, Y, Z. I'm offering everything that employers are looking for, because I'm listening. And if I need to adapt and change what I'm offering to learners, I will do that. And I will do that as soon as it's asked of me, to make sure that I'm staying in step with what's in demand. Okay. It's very difficult. I'm sorry, higher ed, but it just takes them so long. They're lagging in offering what's current, what's in demand. So from the student perspective, if you pay attention to what's in those job descriptions, and there's tons of articles and podcasts and stuff out there, what employers are looking for, that's what you focus in on. Okay. And then from, again, the employer perspective, if they know they can go to some sort of resource and find the people that have those skills that they need now, and they don't have to sit and retrain new hires, that's going to drive them batty. Great. I've got a high school or a college grad or a candidate here. Great. They just spent all this money getting an education, but they don't have the skills that I need. So now I have to spend all this money training you and onboarding you. And you're a cost center for me for the first 3 to 6 months. How do we get rid of that? And then, so it's both sides paying attention. And again, this is where we come in and trying to close that, even from a communication standpoint, to making sure that people are learning the right skills. And those that are I'm repeating myself, but they're in demand and cutting edge. And that's tech, and that's both the behavioral skills and soft skills, communication, things like that Olivia was mentioning before.
And thank you. We have a question to that as well, which is really, we'll start off the Q&A now. I think it's about time for us to maybe unmute everyone, if that's possible, Alan, or if not, just keep your questions coming in the chat. So the question here is, does it make sense to specialize? broad versus specific, which ones should one pick? Pick a path to upskill and or get ahead of the speed of change. Cost and time are important factors as well.
Actually,
Great-
I'll
great
jump in that
question.
one. Yeah. So the way I laid out our full-time program, this is for folks who are just likely launching their career path. So there are foundational modules that I have at Studio and those that are specialized. The foundational ones are things that I've heard from hiring managers across the board, things around critical thinking and leadership and cross-cultural competence, things like that. Doesn't matter where you go, what industry you go in, those are the all-around skills that employers want. And a lot of these are around mindset and behavioral skills. Then it's like you have to think about, well, what do you really want to specialize in? You know, have some sort of pathway to like, what is it that you're interested in? Where are the opportunities? Sometimes those aren't necessarily the same thing. You can pay attention. There's a ton of money to be made out there. There's tons of opportunity. It's just setting yourself on that on the right path. And it's not the end all be all. You will constantly need to, we've been saying this, keep those skills up to date. So even just getting that job is one, you know, part of that journey. But then in the spirit of lifelong learning, this is why at Studio exists, constantly upskilling, reskilling, whatever, to keep yourself value add employee in your organization.
And even the Own Your Career module, right, is something that, is geared precisely towards that. Even if you don't take the full suite of courses, I think that is really relevant because it really makes you look inward and figure some of these questions out, you know, what is right for me, as well as what is smart, where should I be investing that time and money?
Yeah. I have full disclosure, I have a problem with students getting liberal arts degrees these days, because like Julie was mentioning before, you know, if you don't know how to use basic technologies, CRMs, logistics, things, like, what are we teaching these kids? And like, you go to college, so you are career ready and you have a valuable set of skills to launch your career. I have a problem with that. And so it's like making sure if you're going to invest that time and the money in yourself, that you're very deliberate, very purposeful, Bridget and company. So it's like, yep, there are several skills all across the board we need to know, but then paying really close attention to what's the track to get you to that ultimate goal. You know, it'll be a constant journey. Anybody else?
Yeah, and I think depending on one point to make too, depending on age, depending on gender, sometimes like and different industries, there are specific skills that you may, you might have more interest in, and again, like where you are in your career plays into this too. So Bridget, you might have, your area that you're most interested in, sales, marketing, business development, or whatever. And you say, I notice on 10 of these job descriptions, Salesforce, Pardot, Adobe Suite, so pick one of those that you really can hone in on, because those skills, again, will differentiate. And sometimes hiring teams will look for that requirement first. So like your question about specializing, as long as you really are interested in it too, because it won't serve you. So like, I think that being pretty deliberate, like Chris said, make sure you've really thought through what are those skills that you're most interested in, and that you see hardcore evidence that this is something that across many different job descriptions that they're looking for.
Anybody else?
There's something that I have in mind, which is we are in the market of specialists, so it's very difficult to come with very broad knowledge but no specialty. So I think at some point in time you need to decide that you're going to specialize, at least for a time, and you may have to change later on, but to specialize on one or two things, as you said, that stand out, while, and that's dealing with paradoxes, while keeping a broad array of interests in other areas, because your future may come from something that today is not a specialty. But I think to start, it's good to have one or two specialties that stand out. I think there's another paradox that you need to take into account. You have to be tactical in a way you develop yourself. So look at what is needed, look at what could help you to get the next job if you're in a job, and work on those. But at the same time, you also need to have a vision that is more linked to your inner preferences, where you say, well, I would like to invest part of my learning time into things that I have no idea where it leads me, but I feel like I want to learn that. You know, a bit like the typical story of Steve Jobs that has learned calligraphy and said, I had no idea why I would, people made fun of me when I did that, but one day it helped me to create a new keyboards that went on Apple, and today you have all these different characters thanks to Steve Jobs. So I think you also need to have this kind of balance between long-term aspirations and tactical moves, and some specialties that you dig in, and more general topics, and kind of find a balance juggling with these different balls. I think that's keeping an open, being focused and having eyes 360-degree around you.
That's very interesting, Olivia, because Steve Jobs, of course, had a lot of time at that point, right? And one of the questions I saw in the chat floating through earlier on is, I simply don't have the time to upskill or reskill because I'm so busy with my current job, right? And I know there was a survey out saying that only 50-something% of employees actually receive regular learning opportunities. So is it a question of who's actually getting access to or having the luxury to upskill or reskill? And what are all of your thoughts around that? How do we increase that access and the ability to learn and to upskill?
I truly think that is a financial issue as well. It's an economic issue. So when you look at a lower economic earner, they absolutely don't have that access. It's something that I, studied extensively, and what you find is that the cycle of whatever financial area they are living in will most likely be generational and moving forward. How do we break that? We break that by, changing our jobs and by reskilling. It's like sort of a cat and mouse game of going around and around. And what really, the problem is, unless we have actual opportunities that are either sponsored, government-based, state-based, whatever, that open that up to people so that they can learn new skills. I think that's, where are you going to find the time or the money to take a class in Adobe Suite or something like that? But it is where the change happens. It's the secret sauce is not just taking those 4-year degreed people and upskilling them. It isn't. It's actually taking those who haven't even gone to college and letting them know, there are skills they can have that can actually move their career past minimum wage. I think one of the things, Chris, that you completely support is this no hoops concept. This idea that you do not need to jump through any hoops to get a job, like have a college degree to get a job. And I do believe that is where we are moving as a country. Many companies have signed on to this no hoops pledge and are continuing to do so. If you know a company who does, please refer them back to Chris, because I think it's critical that we are looking at our working population as not just white collar, blue collar, whatever collar you fall under, but moreover that we all have the opportunity to do these jobs. You do not need to take biology in college to be a coder. And, where we're looking at things like cybersecurity, or, any kind of graphic work, CAD design. I mean, if you look at everything from healthcare to construction, it all has technology in it. I have a friend who works in healthcare innovation, and the things that they are doing now that are technology based, it isn't just a matter of pricking people with something. I mean, everything from your CPAP to your, glucose things are technology wonders right now. And that's only changing and growing. And the people who work on that, use that, teach that, that's where jobs are. So it doesn't have to be the person who designs and codes this new device. It could be the person who sells that device or the person who markets the packaging for that device. There are so many levels and layers, but I do think I am not anti-college. I have 4 degrees. I understand what the value of college and advanced degrees. But at the same time, as someone who's been working in the working world for 30 plus years, I truly believe it has been my chutzpah and my ability to relearn and take things that have propelled my personal career. So I advise people and I talk to people and I mentor many new entrepreneurs. This is the step I say, don't be afraid to learn something new and perhaps look at your career or your business in a way you may not have thought it was going to go, because the world is changing every day.
I think as well that not having time to follow any course or training, it's not cool, but it's not a big issue if your job is actually full of learning itself. Because sometimes what I see as well when I coach people is that they learn a lot, they do a lot of new things, but they don't necessarily realize, and they don't stop and pause and reflect because they have no time on what they're actually learning on the job. I think that's one of the value of coaching, is to help people make sense of the experience that they have. So I would invite people that think, I have no time to learn, to just stop and think, what does my job bring to me in terms of learning, stretching? If nothing, if I'm just copy pasting things I've been doing for years and there's no added value, then they need to think, is there a better job or a better place out there? But otherwise, I think I'd rather have a job where I'm stretched and learn a lot and have no training than the boring job, flat job with plenty of learning opportunities around. You know what I mean? So if I had to choose, of course, I'd choose a great job and the learning on top of that. That would be
Yes.
the ideal situation.
But I do highly encourage people to go to their employer and say, I want to learn more. And not just say, can I, but go with a program that maybe you found and say, this is what it is. Are you willing to pay for it? Because I'd like to have this skill and stay with you. Not I want to have the skill and then jump ship. So it's it's an investment for the brand, but you may find people are willing to do it. They haven't, most people that are running business are so deep in everything they're doing. They're not thinking about your skill set. You need to think about your skill set and advocate for yourself personally.
Here.
Amazing. Fantastic discussion. Before we go, I want one last firecracker round. Don't think too much. Say the first thing that comes in your mind. If we don't upskill, go.
If we don't upskill as a country, we fall behind. Absolutely. And as we don't upskill as an individual, you will not reach your potential, personally, I believe. And also you will not get where you think you need to go for your family and for your income. We always have to be continual lifelong learners.
System, living beings are only growing or dying. So if you don't upskill, you die. Intellectually and mentally first, spiritually second, and third physically. So if you want to die fast, stop learning.
Going right for the jugular. I'm going to say that this whole skills gap thing has such an impact on us as a society, economically, and on a global scale. This isn't just a US thing. And it's imperative that for us to remain competitive in our societies and get people back on their feet, and make more than just minimum wage, like rising tide lifts all boats. And so the onus falls on absolutely the employers and the individual, but this stuff has to happen because of that greater impact beyond just the individual. No death required.
I would just say upskilling is a movement. And I think this is a movement, and No Hoops Pledge is one of those pieces, if we can get, because this is a company mind shift, this is a job seeker mind shift, and on the heels of inclusion and equity, there couldn't be anything more important than being in the upskilling, reskilling movement.
Amazing. Thank you so much. We've had a wonderful panel today. Great insights. Thank you to the audience. You've kept us going with your questions. You've become part of the movement, as Beth is saying. It's so wonderful to have you be part of the discussion and the solution as well. I'm going to show you also our social information. We'd love it if you could reach out to us, connect with us, and follow us on our social media as we are providing some of the solutions that were raised in the discussion today. And for those of you who join our webinars this month, in the month of September, we have a special offer. We're going to have a drawing at the end of September to pick out a lucky winner for Oculus headsets, which is what is required for Itstudia classes. So go follow us and let's continue the conversation. Thank you again to all our panelists.
Thank you, Georgia.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.